Internet. It's Emily SW.
Sam.
And welcome back to another edition of the Haunted Heart Society Gothic Literature Podcast. I forgot what we were doing first.
I'm going to say you can still say Podcastle because when I said that, I said it as a joke.
Yeah, but it's so cute though, and it fits so well.
I didn't mean for it to actually become the name.
Well, and I just think it's suitable, and who else has a Podcastle?
At least 2 other people.
Well, still. I mean, in a world of billions of people, that's not bad.
That's true.
We're unique enough. In today's episode, we're talking about Dean Koontz's Twilight Eyes. Get your marshmallows out, folks.
Yep. Get your marshmallows. Get your hot dogs.
This is a roast. Get your cans of beans, whatever it is you cook over a fire. This is going to be a roast, so buckle in, leave a like, subscribe, all that stuff. We don't do roasts very often. Usually, we try to be constructive, but there's not a lot.
Here's the thing. We haven't read anything so far that I think I actively disliked.
Yeah, that's true. Usually there's at least one element that keeps you going.
Like, there's things that we've read that I didn't enjoy, but I could recognize that there was still some good quality about it, whether it was in themes of the story. I don't think there was any aspect of this book in particular that I could say that I liked, or appreciate it, or thought added any value to the pages on which it was printed.
Oh, yeah, no, this book isn't even entertaining, which is the thing a fiction book should do, is entertain you. The very least. Like, I love a bad movie, as long as it's entertaining. I can overlook a lot of things if I'm entertained.
You can overlook a song with bad lyrics if the instrumental and the melody are good enough.
Oh, absolutely. It's just like, I don't know if you've ever seen any memes, but there's memes like, if the song slaps hard enough, you can have a little misogyny as a treat.
Like the 5 good Hollywood undead songs.
Hollywood Undead, basically that era of music, like the late 2000s, early 2010s, Hollywood Undead, 303, some of the Fall Out Boy lyrics. If the song is good enough, a little misogyny can pass. It's okay.
See, I was thinking about that. This is a Pen song. Are you familiar with this song?
I feel like you've showed it to me before. My brain is Swiss cheese. Do you want to pause the recording and show it to me? Okay. We had a brief interlude to listen to that song.
Yeah, to listen to Ensoku, This Is a Pen.
Banger.
Yeah, it still slaps.
It's very good.
And it's still funny.
It is hilarious. It is very hilarious. But of the same time period.
That is true.
Those songs I was just telling you. So for a different reason. But as long as the music is good enough, the lyrics don't matter. This book is neither good nor entertaining. And it's never been out of print. Or at least, maybe it has now. But the copy...
Oh, yeah. It was originally published in, 86?
85, I think. I actually... Because I looked.
Well, there were 2 different publications.
Yeah, it says copyright 1985 and 1987 is the original. Because it was originally published as 2 books. And then the copy that I read was published in 2010. So...
Evidently, enough copies are still being sold that they felt the need to reprint it.
Yeah, and I read the afterword. But he says in that afterword that it's never been out of print since he published it.
I'm gonna put the brakes on for a hot minute.
Okay, break away.
Dean Koontz. This is the first book I've read by him, but I definitely heard the name before.
Oh, yeah.
And he's a popular author, and he's popular because you don't have to think about them too much. It's supposed to be light entertainment.
Yeah,
right?
He writes kind of like supernatural thriller mystery kind of books, but they're not supernatural enough to be in the science fiction section of the library.
Yeah, yes. That's right. That was just on the general fiction.
Yes, some of them are, but most of his works, like, I think he's most famous. He's got a couple series, like Odd Thomas is the one that comes to my mind. I've never read any of them either. I'm just familiar because I love the library. I spend a lot of time in libraries. But most of his books are just in the regular fiction section. Only a few of them end up in science fiction.
They weren't even like, well, I know not every library has a horror section. Some of them do.
Yeah.
But not all of them.
No, and this book wasn't scary.
Now, here's the thing. So, the book came up, the reason it was on our reading list is because our theme for the year is circus and carnival. I just went online and looked up Gothic circus, Gothic carnival, scary carnival, whatever. This was just on whatever list I happen to pull up of recommended books.
Yes. People either love this book or hate this book. A lot of people love it.
Reading the reviews. So I don't want to just sit here and be crapping all over something that somebody really likes. So I think we have to talk about why it doesn't work.
Yes.
Still on the subject of the writing, the story starts off with a knife fight.
The most boring knife fight you will ever read.
This should have been very thrilling and exciting, But even a couple pages in, my thought about the book was, wow, this is dry.
You know what? It does not get any wetter. No gravy is introduced. There's no gravy, there's no sauce. I don't even like sauce, but this needed one. I don't know what that metaphor is.
Alright.
But not only is it dry, and I think I said this to you, and you read it before me, and then when I first started reading it, I sent you a message. The thing that stuck out to me the most, right from the get-go, was there are so many metaphors and so much time spent on imagery and comparing a physical thing to this other thing and trying to set the scene, but it was so dry.
You said clinical.
Clinical.
That was the word
yes.
you used.
Mr. Koontz, there is a T in there, managed to make purple prose clinical. And it's a little amazing, actually, but in a really bad way. Like, if we weren't reading this for this podcast, I would have read the first chapter and then just returned it to the library. I would have been like, nah, I got other stuff to read.
This is the dedication, the things we go through for this show here.
So this is actually, this is the first book I've ever spite read. Because I'm the kind of person, I will DNF at any point of a book. Even if I'm 3/4 of the way through, if either something happens that seems egregious to me or I just lose interest, I'll stop. Because there are so many books in the world that I want to read. I have at least 20 books checked out at the library at all times.
See, I don't DNF things. One, because I'm really stubborn. And two, because I want to be sure that I can properly hate on it. If I say things about it without knowing how it resolves, then is that justified?
Oh,
Maybe not. But I want to know the whole thing so that my hatred comes from a place of accuracy.
It's complete.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have the full story. Honestly, that's probably a good way to live your life, generally. And I do try to do that outside of books.
But the reason I could never be a book reviewer or do book reviews is because I don't like most things.
I do enjoy watching somebody on YouTube tear apart a book.
I know, it is very entertaining.
It is.
But it's only entertaining when you agree with them.
That's true.
So if you're someone who, say, you love Dean Koontz, you're just going to be listening to us roast it and your blood pressure is just going to be rising and rising and rising.
Well, whose fault is that, though? Because we said right at the beginning, get your marshmallows out.
For example.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So when I'm
Leave us a hate comment, by the way, if you hate us. Let us know.
When I'm watching bad reviews on YouTube, they're not books. Oh, I mean, I probably wouldn't like them anyway.
Yeah.
But usually they're not books that I've read, regardless.
The only reviews like that I read are usually, like, Twilight.
Well, I don't like Twilight.
No, but I've read it. That's what I mean.
Oh, okay.
Usually the reviews that I watch are books like the Sarah J. Maas books I have no interest in reading. Actually, that's a good example. I read Sarah J. Maas outside of Throne of Glass in the Fairy Smut books. She has this other really popular, well-known series called Throne of Glass. And I read the first book of that series because on the cover it said it was going to be about an assassin and she was in prison, but she's going to get revenge. And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome, a lady assassin. And the whole book was her wearing fancy dresses and going to the ball and flirting with this prince guy that she's supposed to hate. And people tell me that series gets good after the third book. Like,
That's too many.
You want me to read 3 whole books before this gets good? No way. That's too much commitment. I don't care how good the series gets after that.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to wait that long.
No,
a book to...
This book is bad from the first page. So if you're the kind of person
who... back to it.
Get back to it. But yeah, so it's purple prose, but it's clinical. And the metaphors, like, they don't work. And part of it is because it's a first-person narrative. And our narrator is supposed to be a 17-year-old boy. In no universe is the narrator of this book even a human being. It doesn't feel like, a 50-year-old man kind of telling the story of being 17. It doesn't sound like a 17-year-old. It doesn't sound like anybody. It sounds like the author...
Well, no, because the main character has no personality.
No, the main character is a perfect Gary Stu. No flaws. Well, the only flaws he has are very righteous flaws.
Yeah. Okay, so his name is Carl.
Carl!
But he's on the run from the law because he killed his uncle. And the reason he did that is because his uncle was secretly this horrific, monstrous being that only he can see. because he's got magic purple eyes.
Twilight eyes.
Yeah, which is that I thought it was going to be like a thing, but it's not actually a thing. He's the only person who uses that term.
But there are other people, spoiler alert, there are other people who can see these monsters.
But only he has magic purple eyes.
Yeah, so...
And he's got other, psychic powers as it's convenient as well.
Yeah, so he killed his uncle, and he calls these monstrous beings goblins.
Which is another term that he made up.
Yeah, he doesn't know anybody in his personal life up until he was 17. He knew nobody that could also see them. So he came up with that term himself. And they are very grotesque, demon, animal-like beings.
Yeah, he kind of described them as being a few different monsters, like dogs and pigs kind of melded together, and they're inside human bodies. We find out they're actually able to shapeshift, so they can turn back and forth from their human form and their monster form, but Carl can see their monster form all the time.
Yeah, which sounds like a nightmare to me. Not just because of the monsters, but just visually. Because he says that he can see the human features and the demon features at the same time. And so that just sounds like a headache.
He doesn't have any kind of training in combat or... I mean, we don't even know if he took a martial arts class or not. Presumably not.
No, and this story is set in 1963. Very specifically 1963.
Yeah, even though that's largely irrelevant, aside from all the
music references.
Factoids he gave us. He referenced the Kennedy assassination multiple times, but it really had nothing to do with the story.
Which, if you're gonna set a story in the year of the Kennedy assassination, I think, personally, you should have a reason. Because you could just say the 60s, and if the Kennedy assassination doesn't have anything to do with it. In America, I should say. Obviously, in other countries, the Kennedy assassination wasn't as big of a deal, although I'm sure it made ripples everywhere. But if your story is set in Pennsylvania, in America, in 1963, why?
Yeah, Pennsylvania is just kind of the theme of the month. This was a complete coincidence that we've now had 2 stories in a row set in Pennsylvania.
No, you did it on purpose. You're a genius. Scheduling genius.
Secretly, yeah.
Unbeknownst to yourself.
So Carl...
He's on the run from the law. So he killed his uncle somewhere in the heartland, like middle America, the Midwest. And then he's running, and he's tried out a couple fake names in a couple different states. But then he decides to call himself Slim McKenzie.
I took a lot of issue with this because, first of all, Slim's not... It's a nickname. And you don't usually give yourself nicknames. Nicknames are bestowed upon you.
It was the only thing that I liked because it seemed like something a 17-year-old boy would do. Like, Slim McKenzie sounds like a name a 17-year-old boy would give himself when he's on the run from the law for killing his uncle.
Yeah, because it sounds like an Old West outlaw.
Yeah.
Like he's about to rob a train or something.
Yeah, so that to me was the only part of the book that was realistic to a 17-year-old boy. Also, the over-sexualization of female characters, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. On the subject of the beginning, because the knife fight takes place in the carnival where he wants to apply for a job, it took me an embarrassing amount of time to realize that Dodgem cars are bumper cars.
Oh, really?
Because he had Dodgem in a capital letter. So
yes.
I was like, oh, that's some kind of trademark name. So I was imagining, car show cars. I don't know what a Dodgem is. And then it occurred to me when I thought about the sound of the word dodge them. Bumper cars.
That's understandable. That's understandable. You know what? That's an easy mix-up. I can't agree with you. I knew they were bumper cars.
I'd never heard them called that before.
I don't know if I had either, but... When I see Carnival made me...
context clues should have made it obvious.
To me, it sounded like the description of bumper cars that I've seen, so I think that...
I've never been on bumper cars, so what do I know?
I haven't, but I've watched my sister go on them.
Oh.
So, yeah, most boring knife fight.
I did figure it out, though. It just wasn't immediately.
Well, that's what matters.
But I did figure it out.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm not a complete idiot.
The knife fight was weird, too, because they have to do it quietly. Because there's patrolling security guards. So they're having this scuffle, and neither one of them wants to be caught. So they're having this weird stealth knife fight to avoid getting seen. If you're gonna start your book with a knife fight, it's gotta be exciting, because I don't know enough about your character to care if they live or die.
That's true.
And as the story went on, I liked the main character less and less.
Because he continued not to really have any personality.
He had no personality aside from really overblown, overdramatic, good versus evil, moralistic, preachy nonsense.
Okay, not hold that thought. Put that thought right in front of you.
Okay.
Put it on the stick, and we're gonna hold it over the fire.
Yep.
Gothic elements in this story. Why they didn't work in the story when they normally work in... Because Gothic is known for being melodramatic.
Yes.
Overblown. Sometimes preachy.
Purple prose.
Why doesn't it work in this book versus some of the classics that we've read?
I think it comes down to the writing. And that's such a cop-out answer, too. But I think it is the answer. Like, in the classics, when something's dramatic, in any of the early Gothics, The Monk, Castle of Otranto, Mysteries of Udolpho, take your pick. When it's dramatic, flowery, purple prose, it's done in a way that's beautiful to read. And it adds to the whole picture. And it's just entertaining. Like, I don't even know how to describe what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So what the elements we did have? We had good versus evil. That's a very common Gothic element. We had melodrama.
Mm-hmm.
There was a supernatural element. I mean, I still guess call these goblin monsters supernatural, even though he tries to explain how they came to be.
I really did not like
and it's very silly.
It's stupid. Really overblown dialogue. Like, characters having these good versus evil, like, discussions or like, pontificating. And you know what? Thinking about the good versus evil thing.
Mm-hmm.
The reason it doesn't work in this book, I think that'll be easier for me to pinpoint than why it works in other Gothic. But the reason it doesn't work in this book is it's almost shallow. It's so in your face, good versus evil, to the point where the evil people they are fighting are actual, like, demons.
Here's, I think, part of the problem. Carl spends a lot of time telling us why the goblins are bad, but we never really see those actions.
No, that's true. It's all told to us.
He tells us the whole thing about his uncle. In retrospect, he never is really able to prove that it was his uncle behind the tragedies that befell his family.
Yeah.
That he tells us about. It's a lot of coincidences for it not to be related, but he has this assumption that they are. He never really proves it to us beyond that he can see a monster face. He tells us the goblins are planning to do this. They're going to do that. I have to stop them before they do it. But we never really see them do anything until the second part.
Well, yeah, and everything in the first part is in response to something. He sneaks... Well, the goblin he has the knife fight with is doing something to the bumper cars. Presumably sabotaging them to cause an accident. Like, that's a big thing, you know, the goblins are always trying to cause accidents to hurt people.
According to Carl.
But when they have the knife fight, it's because Carl comes in with a knife. So, I mean, anyone would defend themselves whether or not they were actually a demon goblin bad guy. That's a really good point.
We don't... The first and second parts are almost like two different books.
Well, and they were originally published as two different books.
Yeah, but tonally, they're quite different. And I think by the time he got to the second part, he had a little bit of a better handle on how he wanted the action of the story to go. So I found the second part to be more entertaining. Because it was a little more action-y and it clipped along a little faster.
Yeah, definitely more happens. But to me, at least the carnival setting, I think was more interesting. If part one in the carnival... If he had written it better, I think this could have been a really cool story.
I think that's the frustrating thing about it, is you can see he clearly has good ideas.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah,
that's all you can say.
He's got a good idea.
You wanted to talk about the terrible depiction of women. So I guess we'll bring the story forward a little bit. Carl asks the carnival head guy for a job, and he tells him, go talk to this game owner. And if you can get along with her and she lets you work for her, then you can work for us.
Carl, Slim Shady, whoever, he's 17. I keep wanting to call her Raina. Raya Raines. Raya Raines is an adult.
Also, that's not her real name either. That's also a made-up name.
Yeah. But she's in her 20s. I forget exactly.
She's like 21 or 22 something.
Yeah, so she's an adult. And they end up having sex and forming a relationship, which is gross.
It's still inappropriate because she is his boss.
Oh, absolutely.
Before they actually have this encounter, the only times they interacted was when he would go to her trailer to give her the money at the end of the day. And then all of a sudden, she wants to go for a walk and they're sitting by the river and then she's trauma dumping.
This character exists purely to be sexy and traumatized. Before the gross relationship sex part, the way Carl talks about her in his narration is disgusting. Like, it's so gross to read, which maybe is also accurate to being a 17-year-old boy. I don't know, I've never been a 17-year-old boy. But, like, she's so sexualized right out the gate. It's very men writing women. And Carl's talking about how he's gotta hide his erection with the money pouch.
Oh yeah, that was right when they first met.
I know that's a thing when you're going through puberty, like the first time. You know, boys apparently get uncontrollable, whatever, but he's old enough where he should be past that point. I don't know how it works, but I'm like, this is a little weird. But that's all she is. She's trauma, legs, tits, and ass.
Yeah.
That's all that character is. That's the only reason she exists. She does not contribute to the plot outside of that. She only exists to be traumatized and so that Carl can, like, reform her. Which is so gross.
She kind of just is there to also kind of justify his little goblin hunting because she's got a goblin story herself.
She's the first person that he meets that he knows can see goblins. Mm-hmm. Like, they realize they can both see them. And it turns out one of the other carnies can also see the goblins.
Can I say, too, when I realized that they were about to do the dirty, I skipped over it. But when I got to the end, what I did see of it was not romantic. It was not sexy. It was not sensual. It was just clinical and gross.
Yeah, I also, on your recommendation, I skipped that scene as well.
He's a teenager, and she is his boss. There's no way that relationship was appropriate.
No, they have no chemistry.
They had hardly talked to each other.
It's all just trauma.
There was no, getting to know. He of course, because he's got these magical purple eyes, he perceived that she was sad. I'm seeing distress. I see sorrow. That was the whole basis for their relationship.
There aren't a lot of women in this book to begin with.
No, there's like 3.
Yeah. I think he talks about one of the women is like a dwarf with the show.
No, there's a freak show. And one of the women is like, the world's largest woman. And she's very, very big. But you know what? I did end up on a little bit of a rabbit hole because I thought, since there wasn't really too much to talk about in the book itself.
Yeah.
Why don't we talk about goblins? And I was trying to do a little research. Goblins are kind of an elusive topic. Because there's no real agreement on what a goblin is.
Depending on different sources, like, their different cultures have different versions, right?
That's another thing. They exist in so many different cultures. And obviously it's just all being translated into the same word for English. But similar kind of beings exist in multiple different cultures, which is how I got on the topic of dokebi, which are like Korean goblins. And then I found out that Zikers, the K-pop group, entire concept is dokebi.
Oh!
And the Korean title of Tricky House, their debut song, is Dokebi Jib, the Goblin's House.
Oh, that's way cooler! That's way cooler!
So, like, they are these kind of... And I was trying to find, too, and even in kind of Korean mythology, they're portrayed a couple different ways, which is very similar to how they're portrayed in Celtic and English and European mythology as well, where they can either be, like, malevolent beings, or they're kind of just mischievous beings. It can go either way. And there's actually 2 goblin stories in that book you gave me. That's like reading with Korean stories.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah. So I obviously in Zyker's canon, they're the tricky kind, the mischievous kind.
Yeah, not the evil kind.
They're playing tricks, and sometimes they help people, or they can just, play tricks on people, or the point of most folklore is you're teaching a lesson. So the character has an interaction with the goblin and they learn a lesson about usually hard work and, the value of work, and that's a common one.
Yes, extremely, yeah.
And stuff like that. But they can also be malevolent beings. And one of the common themes that did come up quite a bit was that they lived, like, in the mountains or they lived underground. Koontz kind of used that when he decided to put the goblins in a mine.
I'll be honest, I think you're being a little charitable to Mr. Koontz. Just for the fact that where do you put your evil lair? Underground.
Yeah.
Maybe he did look it up, but considering most of the other descriptions of the goblins aren't. Because goblins, and now I'm speaking purely from like a Eurocentric, mostly like Celtic point of view of goblins, but they're kind of related to the Fae folk in like Irish folklore, I think, where it's kind of goblins, you've got brownies, they're all very similar in that, like you said, they're mischievous, they play like tricks and pranks, and if you piss them off, they can really mess with you. And a lot of Irish folklore, well, a lot of folklore in general, and also being morals and telling stories with like the values of the culture, they do often reflect unexplained things, try to make explanations for why do bad things happen, essentially. Oh, why did this thing get knocked over? Oh, you must have pissed off the goblin, the brownie, whoever, the house spirit. But the Koontz ones, well, and going back to, we touched on this briefly, but the goblins in this book are man-made. I don't know why that was necessary. It almost felt like, now again, these were originally published in the mid-80s, 1985 and 1987. You can really tell they were published during the Cold War, I think, especially in the second part. It kind of reminded me, like, I felt like he was trying to go for like a Godzilla thing. Because if you don't know, Godzilla, the original Godzilla, was made in Japan. He's created by nuclear fallout, essentially, from the bombings in World War II. And so all the nuclear radiation wakes Godzilla up, and he comes and... So Godzilla is, at the core of the story, an anti-nuclear war. It's a response to that. And so I almost felt like he was trying to make the goblins something like that, where they were, spawned of human whatever, and it just didn't work.
And their ultimate goal, too, was to create a nuclear war.
Yes, they were trying to destroy humanity, or...
Just for reasons.
That's the other thing. Villains, bad guys, even supernatural creatures in Gothic, they have motives. Even if it's like a vampire trying to survive, trying to live. Obviously, they're the villain, Dracula was killing people, but he has a reason to do it. He's not evil just to be evil. He exists. He's not really part of the ecosystem, right? But, like, do you know what I'm trying to say? Where, it's like you see a fox kill a rabbit. The fox isn't evil. The fox just needs to eat. You see a rabbit eat your roses. Well, it's not going to eat roses. You eat your garden.
Yeah, like the 2 minutes that I went upstairs to get a pair of scissors and the rabbit plowed down all my bean plants.
Oh my god, did it really?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Like, you're not gonna get mad. Well, you might get mad at the rabbit.
I was a little mad.
But, like...
I wasn't mad that the rabbit ate the beans. I was mad at the fact I was outside looking at the beans. I went upstairs to get a pair of scissors. I went back downstairs. And in the time it took me to do that, the rabbit ate all the beans.
A very well-timed rabbit.
And then it was staring at me from the yard.
The goblins are they're created to be in this book. They don't feel real.
Yeah, they were supposed to be super soldiers. I think it feels like that's another very Cold War element.
It is also it comes up a lot with like zombies or zombie video. Well, specifically I'm thinking about Resident Evil, because if you don't know this about me, I love Resident Evil. Every single stupid story aspect, I love Resident Evil. But the whole thing of the zombies of Resident Evil and the monsters is that Umbrella Corp is trying to genetically modify super soldiers and then sell them to governments or mercenaries or whoever. And that's how you get the zombies and all the different monsters in the Resident Evil universe. Not Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8. Biohazard is a little different. We're not going to get into it right now. That's unrelated. Anyways, that's a common motive. Like, oh, you try to make a super soldier and then stuff goes wrong and it turns against you. Which I think is part of the kind of man versus God, man versus nature, trying to create life and screwing it up, or modify and then screwing it up. Which is another theme that comes up in a lot of Gothic works. But it doesn't work here, I think, because it's like cartoonish, which also feels very 80s to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's another Gothic element that just didn't work for me. I think the goblins would have been more compelling without that human element.
Just as monsters?
Just as demons or monsters with no explanation. Honestly. Like, it added nothing to the story. And I'm sure he was trying to... You know, there's a thing that keeps coming up about how not everyone who's evil is a goblin in this book. Like, it comes up a couple times in conversations that Carl and Raya have about how not every evil person is also a goblin. Sometimes people are just evil. But I don't know, it just didn't work for me. And that's another thing that this often bugs me if it's not done well. When almost like all the bad people or all the bad things that happen are attributed to a supernatural cause. Because I do think the quote-unquote evil that human beings are capable of is monstrous enough on its own. Like, you sometimes making human evil a monster, I think, undercuts. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
I don't either. Well, there was one other, I think, interesting point in this book, which was the Kitty Genovese story.
She comes up in the second half because instead of being in Pennsylvania, they go to New York.
Well, no, they were actually in Florida. That's another thing.
Why did I say New York?
The thing with Kitty happened.
The thing, yeah.
That was a real story. Okay, they go to, I think it's Gibtown, which I think is either actually, well, it is actually based on where a lot of carnival people used to go, and that would where they would winter. Mm-hmm. But I was thinking, because there's this whole thing about them driving back to Pennsylvania from Florida, and they're kind of talking about how they're seeing goblins on the road and the goblins running them off into the swamp. But I was thinking about that because you know how many people recently have been found who disappeared in Florida because they drove off the road into water and no one knew they were there.
Oh, really?
Until, like, really recently. Yeah, there was, like, more than one case where people had been missing for decades were found, like, in lakes
in the swamps and stuff
in Florida.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
So that was just something I was thinking about last week. It's like, oh, well, you know, if he had been writing this now, he could have attributed all those people disappearing to the goblins running them off the road.
And just another reason not to go to Florida, really.
It was fine. Kitty, that is Genovese, right?
Kitty Genovese, yes.
Real incident that happened.
Yeah, very famous case, actually.
And they kept, in the story, they keep trying to use this to justify where they need to go back to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go in. It is a pretty gruesome case, but Kitty Genovese was assaulted and murdered in New York City in, I think it's the 70s.
Well, it'd have to be before.
1964. I don't know why I said 70s. It would have to be
in the time the story took place, because when they find out about it, it was like a new breaking story.
Yeah, so the assault happened, and the murder and everything happens in 1964. I think there was a really famous news article that came out that was later proved to be extremely inaccurate. Maybe that came out in the 70s. The reason this case is so famous is because it was in the middle of, like, a neighborhood. So theoretically, the New York Times published an article that said 37 witnesses either saw the attack or heard it, and nothing was done.
Which was not true.
Which was not true. It was greatly exaggerated. First of all, it wasn't 37. But second of all, there were people who did call the police while it was happening, and the police did not prioritize the situation, so nobody was dispatched immediately.
Which is why now they created the 911 line.
Yeah, so this was before 911, and so it wasn't prioritized properly. And I'm assuming probably because different people calling with slightly different complaints, maybe they get somebody different, they don't make the connection. They don't realize it's the same situation, because it sounds like a very gruesome attack. Like, she was attacked, and then she kind of started getting away while she was stabbed, trying to get help. And the killer actually, like, tracked her down and finished the job. But yeah, so they keep bringing her up. Like, she's almost, and this is also gross to me, because this is a real case of a real woman who was brutally assaulted and brutally murdered. And Mr. Koontz uses her as another thematic plot device. And it did not add anything to the story. He was using it as kind of like they say to each other, remember Kitty, that's why we do this. Why did you need to take this real woman's tragedy and her family's tragedy, her friends, like all these different people were affected.
Well, you know what? I guess in the end, we did learn a couple things. I learned about Xikers in Korean mythology.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
We learned about the 911 formation in New York City.
Yeah, we did.
So that's not nothing.
No, it's not nothing. They drive past a school, and he's like, let me look at it with my special eyes. Oh my god, the vision I saw of death is gone now. Good job, me. And then, because him and Raya are, really seriously injured after they do all this stuff. And so he's like, I'm retired. Let's go be married somewhere else and have fun together and be on a beach. Screw him. I've done my part. I'm done. And then the end of the book is like, gotta go back at it. Work's not done. I think the preachiness was the most off-putting thing about this book. The bad writing, pretty egregious, I'll be honest. But the preachiness is just... And I think it's not even good preachiness. It's like, what are you preaching here? Don't
This was the year that Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas.
This is... Well, and in the last freaking paragraph, too, he lists a bunch of songs, which I thought was pointless.
Especially because none of the characters listen to music at any point in the story.
He's talking about Louis Armstrong and Barbra Streisand and Broadway and the Civil Rights Movement.
He couldn't have incorporated any interests for his character into the actual narrative.
No, he goes on, that was the year that this, that, and the other thing happened, but it was not the year that our secret war with the goblins ended. Okay. It's so stupid, but, what was Dean Koontz actually preaching about here? Nothing. What evil was he preaching against? What was he trying to tell us as an audience? This was grounded in nothing.
Alright, on that note, should we wrap it up? I think that's everything that we wanted to say.
Yeah, I do just want to make a quick note, because the best part of this book was at the beginning of both Part 1 and Part 2. Dean Koontz has some quotes from other better authors. I honestly, legitimately think you just go look up these authors, read their stuff, you will be much better off. So, and this was another Gothic trope. Shakespeare.
Oh, yeah.
The very first part of this book, after you get past the title page and the acknowledgments, the dedication, all that stuff, is a Shakespeare quote. It's from Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 2.
You cannot have Gothic without Shakespeare.
No, you cannot. And Hamlet is one of the most Gothic Shakespeare things you can quote. I had thought some of nature's journeymen had made men and not made them well, for they imitated humanity so abominably. So there you go. That's the thesis of the book. Next quote, hope is the pillar that holds up the world. Hope is the dream of a waking man. From Pliny the Elder, who, this book should have been about him. He died trying to save his friend from Mount Vesuvius. And then the last quote, I am on the side of the unregenerate who affirm the worth of life as an end in itself. Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., who was a Supreme Court Justice in the early 1900s. So I highly recommend, look up Pliny the Elder. He wrote the first encyclopedia.
Well, that's cool.
If I got anything out of this book, it was that knowledge. And you know what? I'm going to do some more research on Pliny the Elder.
Yeah, we learned some fun facts.
We did. So I guess it was worth it in the end. We had our first official podcastle roast. Let us know what you thought. If you like this format.
If you just want to hear us talking shit about things.
Yeah, we could add some things into the rotation if people like this.
If people really want bad reviews, they just need to ask me what I'm reading at the moment.
You should do a review of, what was that? Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, that book that put you into a reading slump. Oh. No, that was Neil Gaiman. We can't talk about him. He's canceled.
Yeah, Neil Gaiman's American Gods cursed me. I don't have that book anymore.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't want to talk about Neil Gaiman.
Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, the book was not good. The movie was entertaining, but the book is not.
But yeah, so if you like the roast, let us know. We can work some more in. And
I'm sure we'll probably get another dud. Just the more we read. It's inevitable.
And it is inevitable.
If you very specifically, I guess, want to hear bad reviews.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could add it into the rotation. We can even just be meaner, generally.
Yeah, well, like I said, I know how frustrating it is when people are saying nasty things about something you really like. So I don't want to be that person, even though I am that person. I don't want to be that person.
I get that. You don't want to put that negativity out there. Not necessarily. I get that. I'm a hater. So.
I mean, so am I.
Yeah.
But not publicly.
Do we want to throw a question at the end here? What did you roast over our metaphorical fire?
There we go.
So if you're at a campfire, what is your preferred thing to roast? Are you a s'mores, a marshmallow person? Do you just eat the roasted marshmallows? And even, let's just focus on marshmallows. Do you like marshmallows at all? Do you burn them too crisp? Lightly toasted? I don't like marshmallows, but I love a s'more. So yeah, let us know how you like your marshmallows, if you like your marshmallows. And what's your favorite, are you a classic s'more person? Do you put a peanut butter cup in there? Other kinds of chocolate? Things that aren't graham crackers? Give us your combos.
This is not recipe mining at all.
No, definitely not. Although, if you put something good down there, maybe we'll try it. Give you a shout out on the Insta. Follow us on Instagram. Like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell. We'll talk to you next time when we read something that's, please God, better than this.
Well, the bar's pretty low, so...
It is. It is pretty low.
Alright, bye.
Bye.